talking about AI and the impact, we actually see a natural evolution between personal data and what happens next. So if you want, actually, there's a bit of literature there, but GDPR was a first big step for us to understand the data process and the definition data processes. And there is one guy that has helped us a lot to understand that, which is Rafael Pellon. Rafael, lawyer, our legal advisor, and has been helping us from Brazil, but all across, to discuss all of that. Now, interestingly, it's not just what you collect, it's what you do with it that matters. So all of a sudden, regulation-wise, we have seen an amount of activity in the last few months, years, which is superb. So much that perfectly, as we were planning this, we've seen that the European, 6 days ago, the Union release is white paper on artificial intelligence that goes after last year EU guidelines on ethics in artificial intelligence context and implementation paper, something everybody should read at night, fantastic paper. But also in Brazil, voila, actually you beat everybody to the game. You already have a law on an open consultation on AI. A lot of things, a lot of early stuff, but actually there's some real business implications, and taking it seriously, there's some real steps, and probably would like to talk about it. But before I sit down, because I need to look back to them, the EU, and that's a question to you, put down some requirements for trustworthy AI. A couple of questions on each one of them, a couple of words on each one of them. First one, human agency and oversight. So a human needs to look over AI. There is a human that oversees any AI. That seems to be straightforward. So okay. How many people will really look and manage everything? We'll see. Robustness and safety. Well, I'll give you now, robustness and safety. What's a robust and safe AI from a legal perspective? Do you think that's...
Hi. Now I got the mic. Good afternoon. Yeah, past midday. So what we're seeing right now is we have these requirements and guidelines surging all over in Brazil and in Latin America as well. The US is starting to talk about it. This kind of key requirements, and the UN is also pushing them, saying, how do we kind of protect humans from the AI revolution? Seems like these strange screen players from Terminator coming over and over again. Then in Brazil, we were discussing this when we were approving the data privacy law back in 2018, and we approved that in 2018. It's going to be, it should be effective this year. We don't know if we are actually implementing that for real. One of the key elements is, and it's already on the law. Originally, we needed the human oversight for AI systems. Then a bunch of banks, MNOs, financial companies, and health companies went to the government and said, we don't really know what is human oversight of AIs. Like, should we put a guy looking at a screen? What exactly is that? And that doesn't really work. We don't know what the AI is going to do. Like, we supply the data, we put the algorithms, it learns, and it will basically do what we're asking him to do. We don't do the math. There's no math going on a screen for people to check. It learns. It's alive, kind of. So after a while, all of the regulators just said, okay, so take off the human oversight. We took it off. We already reviewed the data privacy law twice, and we are going to review it the third time after carnivals. On the second review, we took it off, and we just said, okay, there's no human oversight, and we traded off for basically two really specific guidelines, which is we cannot use any data and AI systems if you're going to cause any harm for a person in terms of credit checks or financials or on the financial system, such person needs to be able to ask a review for a human, and that's okay. So there's no reviewing or oversight of an AI platform, but a human needs to check why the harm is being caused, the effect, not the hows. And second one, we cannot use data to cause any harm or block anyone from getting access to any health systems. So if you're gonna use like my health history to block me from getting a surgery or anything like that, and somehow I believe the system doesn't have any motivations, like there's no reasonable cause for you to block me from getting the surgery, it's just the answer is usually because the system said you couldn't do it. Then a human needs to review it, and it's going to be unlawful as of August. Okay. In terms of robustness and safety, is basically you cannot hack it, but we know that's not how it works right now.
Well, if I look back at what you exactly saying in all of those, there's a lot of apple pie statements. Why not? We do like it, but there is no real content behind it, unless you go back to Brazil, where you actually have said that's what it means.
Yeah.
So that you say there is something you shouldn't do, well, credit checks. Or if I look at the entire document, there is a lot of interesting points. I think it seems that they are trying to find good territory. They're trying to find a differentiation also between themselves and the US. The entire document starts like, we are not the US. The US have done something else. They left everything to the company to run it. We are not China, or the state tells you what to do. We are Europe, and we'll do a bit of both.
Yeah.
But the bit of both right now doesn't seem to be very clear, to me at least, on what are the real implications of all of those. Transparency, again, is how do you know transparently what an artificial intelligence does? It does it on its own.
Yeah, but one of the topics we reached the wall in Latin America was a lot of NGOs, governments, and regulators were asking, like, I want to see how the AI takes the decisions, and people were, it's kind of alive. It takes decision by itself. There's no one pushing any buttons. There's no buttons. So, and even if they show you an algorithm, and they show that to some NGOs, people were trying to ask them questions, and no one was actually understanding what is the algorithm by itself. So it's complex because it's math, like pure math at some point, and people don't really understand the code. Then they try to block the effects. What we are doing right now is, one, it's impossible at some stages to understand what the AI is doing. We just want to see if it's collecting the right amount of data, so it takes the right decisions. If it's any kind of harmful decision, how do we review it by a human, but not the whole procedure, or we don't review the AI, but the final outcome of it. And three, we need this self-regulation. So one of the philosophical outcomes of the Brazilian data privacy law is to recognize that no regulator will ever get a view or will be able to regulate all of the outcomes of any AI systems. So we are not going to regulate it. We are just saying the industries need to self-regulate. The government will, of course, act on any potential harms and effects that we have. But even the government branch that is going to be responsible for that, they're just saying we will have harm being done, but we will try to educate first. We are not just going to penalize everyone all the time. If that's the approach, we are doomed. So that's not how it's going to go.
Out of you, anybody has got some good thinking on how to regulate or what should be done and not be done in AI? No?
If they move, you can try to kill them.
Well, exactly.
I learned that from the Terminator movies. Yeah, it usually works.
It actually sounds like a lot of what we're seeing here is very from sci-fi movies. It's trying to figure backwards. The problem is still it's pretty unimplementable. The diversity and non-discriminations, everybody would agree that it should not be about discriminate people or taking generic statements or associations which are not based on anything. But this is actually representing AI, we've seen in the past, has turned out to be sometimes pretty racist, or just because it was representing the bias in the industry, in the society. So how does AI challenge society itself, and how do you define discrimination? Pretty impossible. So we're going on a very high level just to say, what does it mean for business? What does it mean for you?
Yeah, the approach we are getting right now, not in Brazil, but in all of LatAm. Brazil was just the first one in LatAm on the privacy and regulation wave. But we have Argentina, Mexico, Chile, Uruguay, and the Caribbean countries as well. They're moving on like how to implement these laws regulating the use of data. Their approach is still too focused on how do we protect jobs, not really on how do we make the systems work for real. So they're still trying to approach it from an angle where I need a human to overview a screen. I need people to be able to correct the AI if needed. I need you to keep employing people as if nothing wasn't being done by a robot already, by an AI system already. So regulators are too afraid of the whole shake-up of the work environment. And this, like, it's a small angle, considering the whole seismic change we're gonna see. And it's still too shallow, I think, because they don't really know how to regulate it.
So if I were to talk to a regulator today to touch some of it, to play the game, I would say, well, first of all, I know what the impact on you would be. And actually, I'm great at developing new opportunity, new efficiency, and that's why AI would be good. And the second part would be, I'll be good, and by be good is, this is how, theoretically, my thinking in AI goes. This is the value that I'm talking about. And that's why I don't think I'm inherently introducing bias or negativity into the system. So having a structure, just like in GDPR, having a view of where your data is and where it flows, having a view of what your AI is actually applied to, right now might not be great, but be good enough to tell people, hey, I know what I'm doing, and I think this is positive, etc. So is that good enough to think?
Yeah, but like, even though, like, we all say discrimination is wrong, we shouldn't discriminate. Just this week, we had the opposite example in Brazil, like in the beginning of carnivals when we were coming to Barcelona, we were seeing this news from Brazil where this girl, which is a minor, came into an Uber to go to a block party. You know, we don't use all of these clothes all the time in Brazil. It's too hot, especially in carnivals. So the minor was in her customs. Yeah. I needed to touch about it, Joe. And she entered on the Uber, was going to a block party, using her shorts and skirts, I don't know. And this Uber driver started going into her and asking these strange questions like, how old are you? You're too pretty, and actually trying to get something out of the girl. And she did two things. First, she started filming with her cell phone, the ride, and you can see the guy chasing her psychologically, doing these really nasty questions like, she said that, and she was trying to block him and to cut him off, just saying, you look like my dad. And the guy replies, I would do things with you that your dad doesn't do. And then it's from there to worse. And of course, she filmed, she got out of the car, posted up on a social network, on Instagram. In 12 hours, the guy was blocked from Uber. Everything was being solved by Uber. The platform was protecting the girl. I don't know if you've seen Uber. The biggest issue with Uber right now is the amount of these cases that are happening all over the world, in Brazil as in the US as well. Then some regulators started calling saying, why is this guy driving for Uber? Why aren't you discriminating this guy? And Uber said he has a valid driver's license. He has the age to drive. He doesn't have any prior criminal records. That's what you asked me to check. I checked. And then when they go online, the guy has a history of going and visiting pornography and child pornography websites. So is this something we should discriminate? And then Uber starts to ask, like, should I be checking people for child pornography? No one asked that for me. So is this the kind of discrimination we should be doing? The government is asking them to do it. And then the lawyers start asking questions like, so we shouldn't discriminate unless it's child pornography. So do you understand the gray areas we are entering here and how tricky that can be?
But there is another thinking for business and impact, which is you might be sitting on an opportunity to test before the laws will arrive. So there is an advantage to build my AI understanding now, because there is no limitation theoretically of the type of data you might have right now and what you can do with it.
Yeah.
But maybe that's not going to be like that in 2 years time.
What we're seeing is a lot of companies running to amass the biggest amount of data they can as fast as they can, even though we will need to revalidate this data to be able to use it, because we will need the consent to be renewed. But the trick is, as the Brazilian law, as in the EU, anonymized data doesn't need to be need to have a renewed consent to be used. So that's why everyone is chasing right now. So amassing the biggest amount of data they can, and then anonymize it, and then we are able to use it for all the things we want. I have 2 clients in Brazil right now that their sole goal is something we call enrichment of databases. So they exchange data with brands and other companies, and then they anonymize it and give it back to the brand with way more data points from a certain user. But we don't know who it is, but we know where it goes every day, what it shops, where does it go, where it goes to the doctor, when it goes to the doctor, what's the car, what's the average income, and everything else. They know the person, we just don't know their name, but we know everything else.
It's kind of interesting, going back to the identity discussions before, it's interesting what identity is. We're not going there now, we don't have enough time for that. But obviously, while Dario, I exist and I have an identity issued by government, but I'm sure there's another Dario somewhere who knows exactly does all the things that I'm doing without being called Dario. And I'm thinking, well, where's going to be the difference between this one and that one, apart from a number somewhere? Well, that's pretty far from where we are. But we might be doing something similar. So there's going to be a synthetic Dario. It is not called like that, but it's used as a model to know exactly what kind of TV program you might watch in Vietnam, on Netflix.
One of the things from I thought Tim was going to ask about it, people adapt. So when we started talking about the lack of privacy, we started seeing the surge of WhatsApp and messaging. So people stopped sharing everything for everyone and started sharing with their peers, their friends, and their best friends. Now what we're seeing is because of the lack of privacy, and because if I want to buy like a shirt, I need to send my passport or my social security number. We're seeing this whole tokenization of the mobile commerce and the digital economy, where we have these multiple identities. Not all of them are real. So we are seeing right now the surge of fake credit cards that are temporary. My credit card issue a token that I can only use once. And now we are seeing the beginning of other companies trying to do the same thing, but with identities. So instead of needing to send my social security number, I can send a temporary number that represents me for like 6 hours. So I'm buying a shirt, I have to put my credit card number and my social security number. I'm putting these temporary fake numbers that only last for one transaction. So the shopper cannot discover that is actually me. They are getting someone, but that's not me. So one of the things we are starting to see right now is because of the lack of privacy, you have to multiply yourself in this whole world of identities that lasts for a few hours. So you do copies of yourself, they auto-delete after a while. It is a struggle.
Watch out for copies of Rafas around the Barcelona in the next few hours. Well, it turns out that we're probably running out of time. Before, it's another chance to check your thinking of AI before we conclude. Any comments or questions? Anybody would like to say something? Speak now.
You're expecting me to ask.
No, I know this guy. I know this guy.
I can always come up with a question if you want me to.
Oh well. It does work, man. This one doesn't. This is my toy. I keep it just looking for. There you go.
I'm not sure if I'm really sort of recapping what you said at the beginning, but the thing about AI seems to me that the government and regulators can't be expected to understand it. It's too complicated. And the companies themselves can't be expected to understand it. So the only people who can really understand it are like genius software developers, and that are setting it up. But even they can't understand the results because, as you say, the AI evolves and comes up with answers. I think they call it the black box problem, don't they? So you have this black box problem where you don't really understand the answers. So how can you possibly begin to regulate an industry that basically nobody understands?
Yeah. I don't know how water comes from my home, but I know if I turn up, it's gonna be water flowing from the tube. It's regulated. I don't know how it works. It's kind of the same thing. We didn't know how electricity would work 100 years ago. It's regulated and it works. We're kind of on the same stages right now. We are inventing a new world and we don't know how it's gonna work. Lawyers, regulators, we always discuss about ex post and the kinds of regulation, if we should regulate now or if we should regulate it afterwards, after we've seen all of the problematic outcomes. Usually the best approach for new technologies is to wait for the problems to arise and then we re-regulate it. What is becoming more common right now is no one is going to understand the reasons why we should regulate and put the nose, like, so the harms that are going to be caused should be regulated. So for me it was a nice decision from the Brazilian government, like we shouldn't put humans to review AI systems. We don't know how that would be done. It's much easier to just say you cannot cause harm for financials and health. If you want to cause harm, if I want to block people from driving Uber because they're misogynists, probably we should do that and no one will complain. It's an area, for instance, where we have room to move. In terms of understanding how it works, it's gonna be testing, failing, testing it again, and so on. I have a lot of cases I could be talking about, failed cases of AI implementations and AI decisions all day long, because that's what my clients are doing right now, and they usually call the lawyer when they see they screwed up, and then it's my job to try to defend them. We're gonna see that every day. It's part of the whole innovation process. By the end of the day, I still believe competition and the best guys will win somehow because of branding, because of protecting data, and because they are giving choice and transparency to users. At some level, at a certain level, we won't have a lot of choice. One of the things in Brazil right now is the government wants to become this huge data broker. They're picking up all data points that they have in the 3 levels of government, municipal, state, and federal, trying to put it all together so they understand you better. We've came out of a dictatorship 30 years ago. And Brazilians are kind of suspicious, saying, yeah, last time the government had all of this information, we didn't kind of had all of these liberties, so it's strange. And we are trying to create checks and balances for that. And we don't really know if the government should be the one, like whenever you say, oh, the government should be the one taking care of personal data, I usually say, I don't know. It's kind of strange because the government, anyone with too much data without a certain level of limits would be too hard, too dangerous probably for democracy, for customers, for anything. So what we're seeing right now is probably how to limit and create the limitations to avoid the biggest harm. So we will have certain level of problems and certain levels of harm. We are just trying to avoid that it becomes a general thing for everyone, but such is life.
And I'd like to add to that because I like the questions. The last time I heard about black boxes, it was applied to finance in 2007. We were not allowed to know because it was too good and it was doing everything was working so fine until it all crashed down. Liquidity was not a problem. It was a new concept of liquidity, and then the biggest financial disaster since the 1930s arrived. Based on that, I would say maybe that's not the best way to go forward. And that goes back to some legal problems. You need to be responsible. You're responsible for your own action. AI is nothing but an extension of your business. The majority of our companies in MEF by now do deploy AI in some form. It just sounds very outward, it's AI. What it is actually, they don't refer to AI, it's a process of some kind. And I think just like at one point, MEF was saying you need to be able to describe what data you collect, why you collect it, and what's the process internally to do that, which ended up in GDPR many other, which was very vague, but you need to know what you're doing. The same point seems to be true today. If you don't talk about AI, but what is your intelligence in your systems, what data do you use, how you're using it, what you're using it for, who's overseeing. And I think that's probably the starting point, that we'd like to talk about it, but not today. As a matter of fact, Rafa, you were suggesting that we should have more of a roundtable. Is that correct? So we will come back with an idea of discussing that a bit more, understanding what it really means, because it is clear that there is some political interest in this area, as there should be. Some of it is in industrial politics, as in separating and so on, and we know that we don't like fragmentation for the sake of fragmentation, which is another MEF point. And finally, there's some real ethical questions. We're not here to answer all of those, but at least to identify the processes to defend your business from future issues that we can do. And then you can be properly responsible as long as you yourself know what you're doing. Have we been talking too much? No, because we still have another long presentation, which we're not doing, but I'll give you some of the highlights. But first, Rafa, thanks for all of this.